The course may be ending. Your journey is not. Welcome to the final module of the Thrive journey. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to do something a little different. For the next few minutes, don't think about what you still need to learn. Instead, think about everything you've already discovered. Over the last 4 modules, we've spoken about many different things. We've explored who you are beyond your disability. We've reflected on your story and how your experiences have shaped you. We've talked about skills, rights, planning, opportunities, and building a path towards your goals. And in the last module, we spoke about something that, for me, is one of the most important lessons of all: how to protect your fuel so you can keep going when life doesn't go according to plan. Those modules were about building your toolkit. Each one gave you something useful to carry with you. But here's the thing: a toolkit is only valuable if you know when and how to use it. That's why this module is different. This isn't another learning module. I'm not going to introduce a new framework. I'm not going to give you another long list of things to do. Instead, I'd like us to pause, to look back, to connect the dots. Because coaching isn't just about learning new ideas. Coaching is about becoming more aware of yourself. Sometimes we already have the answers somewhere inside us. They're just scattered. We know pieces of who we are. We know pieces of what matters to us. We know pieces of what gives us strength. But those pieces don't always connect. My hope is that these 5 modules have helped you begin connecting those dots. Not because I've given you all the answers, but because perhaps you've started asking yourself better questions. If that's happened, then this course has already achieved something meaningful. So let's spend this final module bringing everything together. Not so that you leave with more information, but so that you leave with greater awareness. Because awareness is what stays with us long after a course comes to an end. Before we move forward, I'd like us to look back at the journey we've taken together. Sometimes, when we're climbing a mountain, we're so focused on the next step that we forget to turn around and see how far we've already come. This slide is our opportunity to turn around for a moment. We began with truth of self. Before we could plan a future, we first had to understand ourselves. Then came honor your story. We learned that our story isn't something to hide. It's something to understand, accept, and carry with confidence. Then we moved into rise with skills and rights. Because confidence alone isn't enough. We also need practical skills. We need to understand our rights. We need to know how to prepare ourselves for education, employment, and life. From there, we moved into initiate your plan. Because dreams become meaningful only when they turn into action. Then, in Module 4, we explored value your well-being. We spoke about rejection, waiting, uncertainty, protecting your fuel. Because building a life isn't only about moving forward. It's also about knowing how to keep going. And today, we arrive at the final part of the framework: extend it forward. I don't want you to think of these as 5 separate modules anymore. Think of them as one conversation. Each module builds on the one before it. Together, they form something much bigger than a course. They become a way of approaching life. And that's why I hope you'll remember Thrive not as an acronym, but as a way of thinking whenever life presents you with a new challenge. I'd like you to slow down for a few minutes. There are no right answers on this slide. There are no marks. Nobody is going to judge what you write. This is simply a conversation between you and yourself. Think back to the person who began Module 1. Not the person you hope to become one day. The person you actually were. What was on your mind then? What worried you? What were you unsure about? What questions did you carry? And now, think about yourself today. Maybe your circumstances haven't changed dramatically. Maybe you're still searching for your first opportunity. Maybe you're still waiting for responses. Maybe life still feels uncertain. That's okay. Growth isn't measured only by what has changed around us. Sometimes the biggest changes happen within us. Perhaps you understand yourself a little better. Perhaps you've let go of one limiting belief. Perhaps you've become more comfortable asking for help. Perhaps you've started believing that your disability is one part of your identity, not the whole of it. Or perhaps you've simply realized that you're stronger than you gave yourself credit for. One question on this slide is especially close to my heart. What surprised you most about yourself? I love that question because growth often surprises us. We don't always notice it while it's happening. We only recognize it when we pause and look back. So don't rush through this exercise. Give yourself permission to think. Because the awareness you build in the next few minutes may become one of the most valuable things you take away from this entire course. One of the biggest surprises in my own journey has been this. I thought life would teach me about the world. I didn't realize how much it would teach me about myself. Every experience, every success, every rejection, every relationship, every difficult conversation quietly revealed something about who I was becoming. And yet, for a long time, I never stopped to notice it. I was always looking ahead, the next interview, the next opportunity, the next goal. It took me years to realize that while I was chasing the future, I wasn't paying enough attention to my own growth. That's why I love this exercise. It doesn't ask, "What have you achieved?" It asks, "What have you discovered about yourself?" Those are very different questions. Maybe you've discovered that you're more patient than you thought. Maybe you've realized that asking for help doesn't make you weak. Maybe you've discovered that you're much more resilient than you ever gave yourself credit for. Or maybe you've let go of one belief that had been holding you back for years. I think that last question is one of the most powerful. What is one belief you've let go of? We all carry stories about ourselves. Sometimes those stories protect us. Sometimes they limit us. If this course has helped you let go of even one limiting belief, then you've already created space for something new to grow. So don't rush through this worksheet. These aren't answers for me. They're discoveries for you. Let me tell you something that I wish someone had told me much earlier. A career is important. It gives us independence. It gives us opportunities. It gives us confidence. But a career is only one part of a meaningful life. Early in my career, like many people, I thought everything would fall into place once I got the right job. I thought, once I get there, everything else will become easier. But life doesn't really work that way. Even after getting the job, there were still challenges. There were still moments of uncertainty. There were still things to learn. And over time, I realized that while work is important, it cannot become the whole story. We also need people. We need relationships. We need moments of joy. We need hobbies. We need laughter. We need purpose. We need to look after our health. We need time with family. Sometimes we simply need an evening where nothing extraordinary happens. Just being with people who make us feel like ourselves. For me, spending time with Zoe is one of those moments. She has absolutely no interest in my meetings, my deadlines, or my achievements. She simply reminds me to be present. It's amazing how often life teaches us through very ordinary moments. So while you're building your career, don't forget to build your life as well. Because at the end of the day, success isn't only about what you achieve, it's also about the kind of life you're creating along the way. If someone asked me, out of everything we've discussed in these 5 modules, what's one skill you hope I never forget? My answer would be very simple: self advocacy. Not because it's fashionable, not because it sounds empowering, but because, in my experience, it's necessary. The world is becoming more inclusive. I've seen positive change over the years, but we also have to be honest. We still live in a world where accessibility isn't always automatic. People don't always understand our needs. Sometimes they simply don't know. Sometimes they make assumptions. Sometimes they overlook things they should have noticed. In those moments, our voice matters. I remember there was a time when I tried to manage everything on my own. I didn't want to ask questions. I didn't want to explain what I needed. Somewhere inside, I worried that people might think I was asking for too much. Looking back now, I realized that staying silent wasn't helping anyone. Not me, and not the people who genuinely wanted to support me but didn't know how. Self-advocacy isn't about demanding. It's about communicating. Clearly, respectfully, honestly. It's saying, this is what helps me do my best. Sometimes that's asking for an accommodation. Sometimes it's asking someone to repeat something you didn't understand. Sometimes it's saying, this setup isn't accessible for me. Can we find another way? Those aren't signs of weakness. They're signs that you're taking ownership of your own participation. And I hope that's a skill you carry with you long after this course ends. Because no matter where life takes you, your voice deserves to be heard. If someone asked me, out of everything we've discussed in these 5 modules, what's one skill you hope I never forget? My answer would be very simple: self advocacy. Not because it's fashionable, not because it sounds empowering, but because, in my experience, it's necessary. The world is becoming more inclusive. I've seen positive change over the years, but we also have to be honest. We still live in a world where accessibility isn't always automatic. People don't always understand our needs. Sometimes they simply don't know. Sometimes they make assumptions. Sometimes they overlook things they should have noticed. In those moments, our voice matters. I remember there was a time when I tried to manage everything on my own. I didn't want to ask questions. I didn't want to explain what I needed. Somewhere inside, I worried that people might think I was asking for too much. Looking back now, I realized that staying silent wasn't helping anyone. Not me, and not the people who genuinely wanted to support me but didn't know how. Self-advocacy isn't about demanding. It's about communicating. Clearly, respectfully, honestly. It's saying, this is what helps me do my best. Sometimes that's asking for an accommodation. Sometimes it's asking someone to repeat something you didn't understand. Sometimes it's saying, this setup isn't accessible for me. Can we find another way? Those aren't signs of weakness. They're signs that you're taking ownership of your own participation. And I hope that's a skill you carry with you long after this course ends. Because no matter where life takes you, your voice deserves to be heard.
This next reflection is probably one of the most personal for me. For a long time, I thought success was something people achieved on their own. I admired people who seemed completely self made. But the older I've grown, the more I've realized that nobody is truly self made. Today, when I look back at my own journey, I don't just remember milestones, I remember people, my family, friends who stood by me, colleagues who trusted me, managers who gave me opportunities, people who believed in me before I fully believed in myself, conversations that changed the way I thought, opportunities that arrived at just the right time, moments that I couldn't possibly have planned. Sometimes I describe my life in a very simple way. I honestly feel that I'm a sum total of all the miracles that happened to me. Yes, I worked hard, very hard, but I would never be comfortable saying that hard work alone brought me here. It was hard work and encouragement, hard work and opportunity, hard work and people who open doors, hard work and kindness. That's why I love this exercise, because it reminds us that asking for support doesn't make us weaker. It reminds us that relationships are not distractions from success. They are often one of the reasons success becomes possible. As you complete this slide, don't just think about who supports you today. Think about everyone who has quietly shaped your journey. You may discover that you've never walked alone, even during the times when it felt like you had. This next reflection is probably one of the most personal for me. For a long time, I thought success was something people achieved on their own. I admired people who seemed completely self made. But the older I've grown, the more I've realized that nobody is truly self made. Today, when I look back at my own journey, I don't just remember milestones. I remember people, my family, friends who stood by me, colleagues who trusted me, managers who gave me opportunities, people who believed in me before I fully believed in myself, conversations that changed the way I thought, opportunities that arrived at just the right time, moments that I couldn't possibly have planned. Sometimes I describe my life in a very simple way. I honestly feel that I'm a sum total of all the miracles that happened to me. Yes, I worked hard, very hard, but I would never be comfortable saying that hard work alone brought me here. It was hard work and encouragement, hard work and opportunity, hard work and people who open doors, hard work and kindness. That's why I love this exercise, because it reminds us that asking for support doesn't make us weaker. It reminds us that relationships are not distractions from success. They are often one of the reasons success becomes possible. As you complete this slide, don't just think about who supports you today. Think about everyone who has quietly shaped your journey. You may discover that you've never walked alone, even during the times when it felt like you had. When we hear the word goals, we often imagine something very big: 5-year plans, dream jobs, big achievements, important milestones. And there's nothing wrong with dreaming big. In fact, I hope you do. But over the years, I've realized that goals become much less overwhelming when we stop treating them like destinations and start treating them like directions. Let me explain what I mean. When I was younger, I often thought that once I reached a certain milestone, life would somehow become easier. When I get my first job, when I earn more, when I become more confident, then everything will fall into place. But every milestone simply introduced me to a new version of myself. Every achievement brought new responsibilities. Every opportunity brought new learning. And that's when I realized that goals aren't places where life finally begins. They're simply markers along the journey. So when you look at the spaces on this slide, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, don't feel pressured to have perfect answers. You don't have to predict your future. You simply have to choose a direction. Give yourself permission to change your goals as you grow. That's not inconsistency, that's growth. Because as you learn more about yourself, your dreams may also evolve. Mine certainly did. Some of the opportunities that shaped my life today weren't even on my radar 20 years ago. I couldn't have planned them. I simply stayed open to learning, kept showing up, and kept taking the next step. So don't become attached only to the destination. Fall in love with the journey of becoming. I wanted this slide to be part of the final module because life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's this: difficult days don't send an invitation before they arrive. Sometimes they appear quietly: a rejection, a health setback, a misunderstanding, a plan that suddenly changes, a period where nothing seems to move. Earlier in my life, whenever something difficult happened, I would immediately start asking, how do I fix this? Today, I ask a different question: what does this moment need from me? Sometimes it needs courage. Sometimes it needs patience. Sometimes it needs action. Sometimes it simply needs rest. That's why I wanted you to complete this worksheet. Because during difficult moments, our mind doesn't always think clearly. We forget what helps us. We forget the people we can call. We forget the routines that normally keep us grounded. So don't think of this page as homework. Think of it as a letter you're writing to your future self, a future version of you who may one day need this reminder. One more thing I'd like to share. There have been times in my own life when I thought I needed bigger answers, but often what actually helped me was something much smaller: a conversation with someone I trust, time with my family, playing with Zoe, reading a few pages of a book, going back to work the next morning. Life rarely changes because of one dramatic moment. More often, it changes because we keep returning to the small habits that help us move forward. So don't underestimate the power of your own routines. One ordinary day, lived well, is often enough to begin again. I'd like to end this section with one question: who helped you become the person you are today? Not who made your life perfect, because none of us has had a perfect journey, but who made your journey just a little easier. As I think about my own life, I realize how many people have quietly shaped it. Some encouraged me, some challenged me, some believed in me before I believed in myself. Some simply gave me an opportunity. Others listened when I needed someone to listen. And there are probably people who helped me in ways they themselves will never know. That's something I find beautiful about life. We often influence one another without realizing it. I remember earlier in this course I said that I feel I'm a sum total of all the miracles that happened to me. This is what I meant. Those miracles weren't always extraordinary events. Sometimes they were ordinary people showing up at exactly the right moment. A conversation, a chance, a recommendation, a door that someone quietly opened. Looking back, I realized that my journey wasn't built by one giant breakthrough. It was built through hundreds of small moments of support, kindness, and trust. As you complete this slide, I don't want you to think about achievements. I want you to think about people. Write down one name, just one. Someone who made your journey a little easier. And before we move to the final section of this course, take a quiet moment to appreciate that person. Because none of us truly walks this journey alone. Before we come to the end of this journey, I'd like to share one belief that has become stronger and stronger in my own life. Earlier in this course, I told you that I feel I'm a sum total of all the miracles that happened to me. The more I reflect on my own journey, the more I believe that's true. When I look back, I don't only see my effort. I see people, I see opportunities, I see conversations, I see moments that could easily have gone a different way. I see kindness, I see trust, I see people who open doors without expecting anything in return. And I often ask myself, what do I do with all of that? One answer has stayed with me: I should extend it forward. That's one of the reasons this course exists. I can't repay every person who helped me. Some of them don't even know the impact they had on my life. But I can pass something forward. I can share what I've learned. I can share what worked for me. I can also share what didn't work for me. That's my way of honoring the people who became part of my journey. And one day, perhaps you'll have the opportunity to do the same. It doesn't have to be something extraordinary. You don't have to become a famous speaker. You don't have to start an organization. Sometimes extending it forward is as simple as answering someone's question, helping a junior prepare for an interview, sharing a useful resource, explaining an accessibility feature, recommending someone for an opportunity, or simply listening to another person without judgment. You may never know how much those small moments matter. Just as many people who help me probably don't know how much they change my life. So if life gives you the opportunity, leave the road a little better than you found it. That's all. I think the world changes in exactly that way. One person helping another person who one day helps someone else. We've reached one of my favorite exercises in the entire course, and I'll tell you why. Throughout life, we write messages to other people, emails, WhatsApp messages, birthday wishes, thank you notes. But very rarely do we pause and write something to ourselves. This letter isn't about predicting the future, it's about capturing who you are today. Imagine that 1 year from now, you're sitting quietly and you open this letter. What would you want your future self to remember? Not what job you should have, not what salary you should earn, not what title should be written on your visiting card. Those things may change. Instead, what kind of person do you hope you've continued becoming? I sometimes do a similar exercise for myself. Not because I expect life to go exactly as planned, life rarely does, but because writing things down helps me notice what really matters. And over the years, I've realized something interesting. The things I value most today are not very different from the things I valued years ago: curiosity, kindness, learning, meaningful work, relationships, making time for the people I love, continuing to grow. Those values have stayed with me even as everything else around me has changed. So, as you write this letter, don't write what sounds impressive. Write what feels true. Because 1 year from today, I hope you'll read it and smile. Not because everything happened exactly as planned, but because you recognize the person who wrote it. We've come to the final slide of the Thrive course. And before we say goodbye, I'd simply like to have one last conversation with you. When I first started thinking about creating this course, I asked myself a very simple question. What is the course I wish someone had given me when I was starting my own journey? Not a course that promised success, because no course can honestly do that. Not a course that claimed to have all the answers, because none of us do. I wanted to create a course that felt like someone walking beside me, someone saying, I've traveled this part of the road before. Here are a few things I learned. Take what helps, leave what doesn't, and then continue walking your own path. That's what I've tried to do through these 5 modules. I don't know where your journey will take you from here. I don't know what opportunities will come your way. I don't know what challenges you'll face. Your story will be different from mine, and that's exactly how it should be. But if there's one thing I hope stays with you after today, it isn't a framework, it isn't a worksheet, it isn't even one particular lesson. I hope you leave with greater awareness: awareness of your strengths, awareness of your values, awareness of the people who stand beside you, awareness of what gives you energy, awareness of when to ask for help, awareness that your voice matters, and awareness that your disability is only one part of who you are, not the whole story. You know, in Module 4, I spoke about leaving signboards along a road I'd already traveled. I think that's still the image I'd like to leave you with. I can't walk your journey for you. Nobody can. You'll make choices that I never had to make. You'll solve problems in ways I never imagined. You'll build a life that is uniquely yours. But if, somewhere along the way, one idea from this course comes back to you, perhaps on a difficult day, perhaps before an interview, perhaps when you're doubting yourself, then these conversations will have served their purpose. And maybe, years from now, someone else will stand where you're standing today. If you find yourself sharing an idea, encouraging someone, opening one door, answering one question, or simply reminding another person that they belong, you'll be doing exactly what I hope this course would inspire. Not because I asked you to, but because someone once did that for you. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your time. Thank you for allowing me to be a small part of your journey. I genuinely wish you courage when life feels uncertain, patience when progress feels slow, kindness towards yourself on difficult days, and the confidence to keep taking one step at a time. Congratulations on completing Thrive. The course ends here, but your journey is just getting started.